All right. Well, good morning, Greg. This is our first recording post Greg's 60th birthday celebration.
Which
So,
has changed everything, by the way, just so you know.
which,
That's
so,
great.
so we're back after
Smart
it, where
Alex.
you actually took a couple days off, which
Two
I
days in a
was
row
happy
for the
for
first
you
time in
that
forever.
you did, because you needed that and deserved it. So, welcome back. And today we're going to be talking about things that we've talked about before when it comes to cognition biases, how we think, how we make decisions, right, and how that can get corrupted. But I actually wanted to throw to you to start it off, because this kind of idea is sort of, which some of it we talked about before, but not in the manner in which we are today. It came, via email. You said, "Hey, I was watching this, blah blah." I was like, "Okay, this is a great story to start with." So I wanted to throw to you to kind of start where this discussion came from, and then we can kind of jump right into it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and we there's nothing on the face of the planet that we haven't discussed or we can't discuss in the through the lenses of HBPRNA. So
Right.
this is an interesting one. Shelly and I, we took 2 days off for my 60th. We didn't have emails or phones or anything for those 48 hours, which made it amazing. We came back. We were pretty exhausted after our return through the mountains. Brian, you saw some of those great photos. Feel free if you want to post one of those coming back through the pass. We finally got home and we were exhausted. So we put our feet up and paging through the ridiculousness on television. And there was a series called Alaskan Killer Bigfoot. And so the greatest thing about that is that one, we like to look at the Alaskan home sales realty shows, and then Bigfoot, of course. But just like the ghost that killed somebody, I don't remember a Bigfoot killing somebody. So I had to tune in. I mean, my interest got the best of me there. And so Shelley and I are watching, and the very first thing that comes on is that they find this stone obelisk that's off the port that's in the trees. And the people are coming up with these ridiculous conclusions on why this obelisk is here. And it's a ward off evil. It's to warn the people. And what it is it's in line with the harbor. And you can actually see the marks around it where people had put chains and ropes on it before because they were tying off boats. You get what I'm saying? So I look at Shelly and we're laughing about it, and she mentions that, hey, that's been used for millennia. So I have my phone in my hand because I got 700 messages in the 2 days I was off, and I just enter a quick search, and sure enough, obelisk, it goes back to Greek ports, shows this stuff, so it's been around forever. So we're smiling and laughing about that. So the next one comes up, and the next one that they show is scat, which is poop,
Yeah.
animal poop that's
Yeah.
on a trail. And it's clearly the very first time they show it, Shelly and I look at each other and say, that's wolf poop. We've seen it before. And when you look at wolf poop, it looks rubbery and waxy, and it's dark and black, and it's extruded through a sphincter, so it's got a characteristic taper. There's hair and different bones and everything from what the animal ate. And if you folks have ever seen a fox, it's a big fox. Or if you've seen coyote, it's a bigger coyote and much darker. But it's clear what it is, Brian, immediately what it
Yeah.
is. And so I go to Google Images and I bring up wolf poop, and I show it to Shelly, and the picture is virtually identical to the live action photo that they're showing on TV. And the experts that are around kneeling and looking at it go, what could this be? We've never seen anything like this before. Clearly, this is unprecedented, right? So Shelly laughs and says, hey, we're 2 for 2. And the idea is that we brought up the question, okay? What's the guy says in the episode, you know what? This has got to be some otherworldly scat from some mystic creature, because you can't fake evidence like that. Well, if you're not reading what the real evidence is, Brian, look, I want to go far afield here to piss everybody off early. You're wearing an Axon body camera, and everybody goes, whatever you see on the camera is exactly what happened. No, because you're not getting the
Well,
full
yeah,
360
it's
of
not
what's
the
going
full,
on.
it's not everything that
The
happened.
smell,
Yeah.
the feel, the
Yeah.
anxiety that goes. And you know how I can prove that to you? I can prove that to you with the story of the gosh damn ghost fish. So we've got this old mine back on the ranch, and the mine had been flooded in by the series of tributaries that come down and feed into the Savoia River, Cebolla, named from the Spanish that settled the area. There was a lot of wild onions, and they could eat as they were going along the river. So in this pond, and the pond is probably as big as the room that I'm in, so probably 40 feet by 60 feet, and then it goes out with swampy area that's on there, and it's very deep. So one day, take Nico up there. Nico's just a kid. We're going to do some fly fishing, and there's always some big trout that camp out in those deep waters. And as we're fishing, Brian, I see a skeleton fish swim by. Not lying. It's the skeleton, the actual bones of a fish, like you would see in a flipping cartoon.
Yeah.
You get what I'm trying to say? Or at the bonefish grill, and it's
Yeah.
swimming by under the water, right? So I look and I go, okay, this is great. Somebody's playing a trick on me, and they've spent the money. So I look around, and the fish swims by again. So we're fly fishing, and a fish surfaces and swims by. Brian, I was stymied, and I was starting to believe in the ghost fish until I thought about it for a minute, and I said, okay, what am I missing? And I opened up my aperture, and I noticed that every time the ghost fish appeared, there was a fish in front of it that was very much alive. And what happened is somebody that had been fishing up there had used a system with a Carolina rig or whatever you call it that had 2 hooks on it, Brian, and both were baited. So the one fish bit it and ate it, and he survived. The other fish that was being drug along by the first fish died and decomposed in the water. So what you couldn't see is the fishing line, but the one fish was pulling the ghost fish behind him. Brian, it was so real and so realistic that for a minute you had to take a knee and look and go, what am I really seeing? But just like this gosh damn series of Alaskan Killer Bigfoot, they said the Bigfoot homicides were what drove the people out. Well, then the very simple search of the Port Chatham area showed that what drove the people out was that the highway moved. Okay, the fish stopped coming into the harbor, and the people had to go look for better paying jobs. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the question is that how would a person cling to an opinion,
right,
even though the facts are directly contradictory and disprove their initial faulty hypothesis? Does that make sense? That's where I wanted to throw it on the table today.
So and that's a great kind of a lead-in story to the different types of cognitive factors that affect the way we not only perceive and information, but then how we can rapidly establish an opinion for a number of reasons. One, mostly we want to be right, and our brain is lazy, and I mean, meaning we're not even consciously aware that these processes are happening. This is completely unconsciously happening, which most of it's tied back to survival. Or if you're going to use a theory to explain it, it better have something to do with survival, because those are the only ones that are typically stand the test of time because they work. You can come up with whatever thing you want to call something, but if it doesn't have to do with your primitive brain, so to speak, then it's usually junk. And so again, we always make it's the X-Files joke. Remember, Mulder was always the one who said, people want to believe, right? We want to believe this is true, so we will. But you bring up another thing. Even in the face of contradictory evidence, it's very difficult for us to change our mind. So that's kind of there's a whole bunch of different factors behind that, Greg. So let's kind of jump into why that is before we get into some things you could sort of do to counter that. Now, when I say counter it, like you have to realize you can only do so much. So when we get into cognition biases, which there's like 3 million of them. I mean, what's the joke you always make?
You say the graduate student has to name one before they graduate.
Every graduate student in psychology or neuroscience has to come up with 3 before they can graduate. I mean, it's and what they are is they're all. Many of them are very similar. They're just a different explanation of the same thing in a different context. And you're like, okay, which a lot of it comes down to, confirmation bias and fundamental attribution error. That's stuff we talk about because, it's such a great way to explain how these things work. And when we get into those types of biases, real true cognition biases, there's not a whole lot you can do about it other than know that it exists. Precisely. Know that it's affecting you and attempt to sort of counter that in some way with logic and reason and evaluating, weighing out evidence. But it's really difficult, all right? For everyone or people who are really good at it in one area completely suck at it in another area of their life. So it's very hard. So it's important to point that out, I think.
So I just coined a term, Brian, the inability to do what you just said properly. We'll call it Aristotle's dilemma.
No, we got to put our own names on it.
Brian and Greg.
We
present
should have
Aristotle's dilemma.
It should be
I mean, think about it.
the
You can't
Greg and
just
Brian
name shit.
effect. The Greg and Brian
Exactly.
effect,
There
and
you
then
go.
which is different than the Brian and Greg effect.
Well,
Those are
of
two
course,
different.
they're almost at opposite ends of the spectrum. So let's talk brain science 101
Okay.
and simplify everything.
All right.
So your amygdalae have been around longer than your PFC, your prefrontal cortex, and your amygdalae hate risk. Changing your mind is hard. People don't like to change your mind, and the way that your amygdala looks at a situation is so close to binary, it's funny.
Yeah.
Because what it does is it says, stay the course. What you're doing right now, being sedentary, not moving around unless you have to, is a great survival strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, your PFC is your thinking brain, your newest brain.
That's
And it's
the good idea
thinking,
fairy.
yeah, and it's thinking of long-term benefits, long-term consequences, right versus wrong, risk and reward. It's all those wonderful executive functions. And the PFC is willing to risk. That's what makes the kids get out of the nest. That's what makes the son stand up to the father, the daughter tell the mother, I hate you. Those things are chemical imbalances in the developing brain that force you to go out and face your environment. Now, most of them are amygdala based, which means that most of them are just for you to breed, for you to procreate, for you to forage. You get what I'm saying? To hunt, to improve your chances. But what the PFC does is the PFC starts making distinctions. He or she is pretty. They'll make prettier babies, which will make more money, which will be important in the future. Do you understand the difference there, Brian?
Right.
So one is just literally cut and dried, my safety, my feeding, my fighting when I have to, and the other one is thinking about things and saying, how will this affect me in the long term? So if we understand that changing our mind is hard, and we understand that we've got two different parts of our brain pulling at us all the time, and one is uniquely and distinctly and deliberately thinking about our safety and security, we understand where dilemmas come from. And so I'll give you a quick example. Flipping a coin. You flip a coin, it's a 50-50 chance. That's it. There is no other science other than it's a 50-50 chance. So now if I flip the coin and I got three heads in a row, a neophyte, a person that doesn't think scientifically, is going to go, "You're due."
Oh, you're due for a net for
you're due
tails.
for a tails.
Yeah.
Would I be able in a certain room with a certain amount of people to get them to bet on the outcome?
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But you know
That's
what?
how casinos exist.
That's so. What did we just name?
Yeah.
We just took the difference between your amygdala, which would grab the coin you're flipping and run and use it to buy something, or the PFC, which would say, damn, I think that guy's on a streak. I think it's going to come up heads again.
Yeah.
And the idea is it can't come up heads. It's only 50-50. But you're going to get a person, Brian, that tells you I'm wrong and statistics will bear me out. So what are we saying? We're saying there is no effing ghost fish, that the camera doesn't show you everything, that guess what, Alaskan Bigfoot, you're not a murderer because there was no missing people and no murder. And guess what? People go missing all the time, Brian.
Yeah, all the time.
And very few instances are directly related to a Sasquatch. You get where I'm going? So this goes right to the heart of the issue of people being faced with logic and science and fact, but still would go to great lengths to try to prove that you are wrong or I am.
So, and you brought up a good point. Like when you come across stuff like that, it's a conflicting information. It does release it gives you a sense of anxiety, right? And so that releases different electrochemical neurotransmitters in your body that are no different, almost the same as fear. So it's not that like, oh, you're scared of new information, because people are like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm not scared of it. Like I'll look at something different. It's like, no, you're not realizing it releases a little bit of anxiety. That's turbidity for your brain. And it doesn't like that because it burns calories and goes, oh yeah, I don't know about that. Right. And that causes you then to look at the situation differently, right? I now have this fear-induced emotion. Anytime you're making decisions out of fear, you're not making good decisions, or depending on the context, maybe it is the right decision if it's a survival situation, right?
Precisely.
So meaning if you get a little bit of that anxiety causes that fear. Without you realizing it, your brain is going, I don't want to hear this. This is not good news. I'm going to maybe put in some processes for you to not think about that, not worry about that, and put up sort of a barrier. And that's happening again, whether we realize it or not. And so how much it affects us is going to depend on the person and their exposure and their life experience and all that stuff and all kinds of different factors. But either way, even if you're very open and willing to consume contradictory information, you still have that running in the back of your head. Now, it
Precisely.
might maybe Greg, maybe I get more anxiety than you do because you've been doing this longer, but it's still affecting you too. And I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah.
important to understand.
No, that's a huge. So let's talk about that for a second. Your brain doesn't get anywhere when you second guess yourself. That's
No,
contrary to survival. Do you understand what I'm
well,
trying to say?
it's contrary
Because
to getting through your day, literally,
that's the
right?
should I stay or should I go
Yeah,
moment. And your amygdala is great at that. Snap decisions that are generally better off for you because they follow a pattern of your life. That's what we built a business around, right? Human behavior pattern recognition. And if we analyze it, we can prove it scientifically. So the PFC is willing to do the risk reward. Hey, maybe I'll gain a little bit, right? So there's that constant struggle with this. And I'll give you here's another Aristotle's dilemma called motivated reasoning, right? So scientists come up with motivated reasoning, yet another confirmation bias thing. And what does it mean? It means that you tend to cherry pick the facts that are going to fit your existing
right,
belief. So
right.
let's talk about how that can spin wildly out of control. You live in a walk up and you've got some heavy items that you want to move from your current apartment to this walk up. So you enlist the aid of your friends rather than hiring a moving company. Why? Because you know what? You've been led to believe that your friends are going to be cheaper, and guess
Mm-hmm.
what? They're going to
I'll
work
buy him a
harder. And
pizza.
look,
Yeah,
I understand that there's 30 right angles and two 30-degree angles, but we'll be able to figure that out on the fly. And we wedge the gosh damn bed up in there, and we ruin the
mm-hmm.
upright piano. People out there listening know exactly what I'm
Yep.
talking about. But why do we continue with that course and then double down and just say push it harder or tilt the couch this way rather than enlist the aid of the experts? Because, Brian, when our wishes and our fears and our dreams and our hopes and our motivations, they work together to fool our brain. That's why you remember the story about the Marine jumping between the buildings. When you hear the story about the person that was able to do these amazing things, you
Right.
got to put yourselves in the time and the place and the chemical interactions that were going on. It's almost impossible to make that jump. But why did you do it? Because I think it would help our mission, and therefore aspirationally, I think I can do it. And guess what? The brain's going, oh, fuck, let's go. And the idea, Brian, is you can't do that. That's the dilemma that is created between the PFC and the amygdala. And that's what we have to look out for when it comes to facts. So if we think that a person has explained it, for example, we've got 5 idiots standing there and all of them kneeling down around wolf shit, and every single one of them is going, this is unusual. Look at the way that it reacts. Look at the sun and the angle, and there's no wolf here. Do you see what I'm saying, Brian?
Yeah.
Guess what? Now all of a sudden we have a faux FAUX scientific explanation that's much more palatable than me
Yes.
going back home. And guess what?
And
Because wolves aren't in New York and Nebraska, we have an easier time believing the horse shit. You see, even
well,
if it's patently untrue.
so that's because kind of we get into these sort of belief systems, right? So we
Right?
we create them and they can be completely
Yep.
artificial. I can have an artificial belief system that if it's been working for me, it'll continue to work for me. And we'll stick to that despite, any sort of contrary evidence, again, because we go, all right, well, this is what works. I want it to work. I know it'll work. If I believe it'll work and I believe this is the right way, then
Exactly.
it's going to. And it's like, well,
Right.
hang on. Like, are we
Yep.
really taking an objective view? And like I said, some people are really good at countering those thoughts in specific contexts, but it's hard to do that with everything that you do. And because
Precisely.
that's a lot of calories to burn. And so those belief systems are typically what? It's typically about emotion. So if I have an emotion based one or a belief system, like, and it makes me feel good, well then I'll just look at it, and then now I got to repeat everything that I said because it's hard it creates that sort
You
of,
said
like
it
I said,
earlier, turmoil,
yeah,
turbidity. You're
turbidity.
spot
Well,
on.
and it's
Yeah.
like when we learn, there's an interesting book. It's kind of difficult to read because it's actually so clinical, but it's called, I think I haven't sent you the book, but I sent you the title a while back. It was called Hemingway Didn't Say That. And this guy went through all
Right.
these famous quotes, and he really tracked down in detail with specific references where they came from and how they've been misattributed over time, which sounds like it's really interesting and super cool. Just this is like almost like a technical manual the way the guy writes it. It's like so dry. You're like, dude, you could just tell a really good story here, but instead but I love that because he'll show you, and from here is where we can document it changed. But the idea is that gives me, when I find out that my favorite, hockey player wasn't really the first person to say that, well, it kind of crushes my world a little bit,
Yep.
Greg. And
Yep.
I don't want to believe that. I really want to believe that Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. But
Right.
that's really like a paraphrase from something longer that he said,
Right.
or
But the
this is
beauty of the matter is it utile? Can I use it? So
okay.
be the
That
change you want to
yeah.
see in the world is an incredible quote. Now, non-attribution, I can still use that quote and get through my day. But if I find out that my belief system, that it was Gandhi, and I built up this elaborate story around it, you're exactly right. Now that challenges everything. If that can be wrong, what else can be wrong? If that's not true,
Yes.
what
Well,
else can be untrue? Right?
that's the difficult part of accepting some of that stuff, because then
Precisely.
we think it attacks everything that we know, and it's like, well, no, it doesn't attack everything that you know. It just attacks this one part that you thought where it came from. But is
Right.
it still logical? Is it still utile, like you said? Is
Exactly.
it still an important thing to say? Well, yeah. That's like when we've used a quote before, or someone said, well, actually, that technically comes from here. It's like, you missed the fucking point. Like, the point
Right.
was,
That is the point.
what is the
Exactly.
moral of the story, or what's the
Right.
takeaway? Not,
Right.
did this happen in 1792 or 1798?
No, you're
That
right.
detail is important if in court testimony, but for reasoning and use of the information,
So
it's irrelevant. Does that
let me give you a couple of
but
perfect examples of that, and
and
you're spot on. Yes.
because but that same way of looking at it
Yes.
also kind of gets in the way of how we interpret, especially studies or data or anything like that, right? Because then we go,
Politics,
yeah, that's what I'm
statistics,
saying.
and
Like,
analysis. You're
yeah,
exactly right. So look, there's an old wives' tale that says that how a female is carrying the baby indicates early on, before any tests are done, whether the baby is a boy or a girl. She's carrying the baby high. She's carrying the baby low. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Is it your first birth? Is it your second? Sometimes those wives' tales come from fact-based data where a
right,
midwife has seen hundreds of females give birth, and the lion's share of the high ones were a female, and I might be getting it wrong, but it doesn't matter. But that's not science-based. That's statistics based on a person's experience. So
right.
it's a form of experiential, right? But it's more on the tacit knowledge side because that person saw it themselves and passed it on as being a fact.
Yes,
Now, there's also that, listen, if you crave chocolate and gosh damn Scotch eggs, that you're going to have a baby boy or whatever.
Scotch eggs.
Now,
I haven't had Scotch. I had that
I'm
like
thinking
once.
of
I thought it was
bourbon
really
right now.
like that. I've
Exactly.
only had it like
So
once or twice, but anyway.
you all know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. The bucktooth kid is going to be great at math. The whatever. There's some wives' tale somewhere, and some piece of information lingered long enough that people go, no, it's true. I heard that. So let me tell you how that shit turns into Bigfoot. So here you've got a bunch of Inuit, let's say, children that live in a harsh environment. There's the ocean, and we know we don't go swimming in the ocean, not only because of the temperature, but the ocean will eat you. So there's a lagoon, and the lagoon is a safer place. It doesn't have sharks. It doesn't have the riptides. You get what I'm saying, Brian? But that's what happens sometimes because we're in Alaska. Sometimes we have dense fog. So I look at my child and I go, I know how much fun it's swimming in the lagoon. I know how much fun it is swimming with your friends. But let me tell you something, when there's fog around the lagoon, you're going to miss the shore and you might stand a chance of drowning. So I don't want you going up there. I certainly don't want you going there alone. Now, because there's no consequences, Brian, and it's just the parent telling you, the kids are going to get together and they're going to go to that damn lagoon.
Yeah.
But now what I say is, there's a creepy old man that lives up there.
Yeah.
And when the fog comes, that creepy old man comes out. And I tell you what, you got to keep your eye because he ate a kid's leg in 1957. Now, what I did, Brian, is I added a level of detail and complexity that was in this story. And now some part of you goes, wow, I can believe that. I remember that one-legged kid that I saw at the fair. Okay, the idea is that I make it close enough to be plausible and it's memorable. What do we talk about in class? Making a sticky memory. So the story creates the sticky memory, but then people falsely believe it's true. Now, I could tell you about Krampus. I could tell you about
Right.
trigger warning,
But
Santa Claus,
but
right?
but
But
that's
do they endure?
Yeah,
right?
and
Are
well,
they utile?
and because people then use it you for good or for evil or for whatever reason, that's the
Precisely.
whole the serial killer who goes to make out point to the teenage kids. It's like
Exactly.
that they're trying to get they're trying to stop high school kids from having sex
They're
and
trying to
getting
lower the
pregnant.
STD
That's,
rate.
that's what they're doing. That's what that story was there for. It's
You're
complete
exactly right.
junk. It's
You're
not
exactly right.
like that. That's the thing. But then but then if you actually go to different serial killer examples, like it's close enough to a
That's it.
story that is true, and we make that link. Yeah, but that's not unlike the Hillside Strangler, and they did. It's like, well, no, it's completely different than that. Oh, but or what was it? The not the Son of Sam or who for BTK or whatever who killed the couple who was by the lake, and it's like, well, yeah, but that that's this one
Zodiac.
thing. The
Yeah,
Zodiac killer.
Zodiac,
Yeah, I can't
California. You're
remember.
spot
Yeah,
on.
I
Great memory,
get them
Brian.
mixed up, but
No,
but
but
you,
the idea is sound, because what happens is just like the coin flip. There's inescapable science, but what does scientists say? A good scientist is going to tell you, if I'm given evidence to the contrary, I'm going to adopt the new evidence as long as it's been vetted and tested and socialized.
but
And because listen, there was a time we thought the Earth was flat.
yeah,
There was a time we
well,
thought the solar system rotated around the Earth, and now it
but
does not.
still, people even thousands of years ago knew that the Earth was round. They're like, "Hey, we're wrong here," and
We've been there.
that's the
Yeah,
argument. Is people go, "Yeah, but 10,000 or a couple thousand years before everyone realized that to be true, there were people out there saying it. So maybe this person is out here saying something that in 100 years we're going
right.
to look back and go, they were right." It's like, well,
But
okay,
if I'm going to take an 80-year-old woman and put her on camera
yeah,
and have her tell me a story of 75 years ago when they knelt down and told her there was a boogeyman in the woods, she's going to say it to me with conviction,
yes.
because she's never had her belief system challenged, and it's firmly entrenched in her brain's chemistry and in her
And
emotions.
you'll
So
hear that
she believes it.
when you say someone goes, well, I know what I saw. It's like,
Yes,
no, you don't. I mean, I know you're not lying. You're not
right,
being dishonest. You
right,
actually technically saw that because your brain said that's what you wanted to see. And it
right.
filled in the missing gaps of the information when what you actually saw was not very clear. And it's just getting into perception and then those different cognition biases and perception biases that affect it. But you brought up you started talking about the when we have that information or conflicting information.
Yes,
So even if it's not conflicting, it's how do we interpret data or how do we interpret information points that we learn. And one good example is um, there's I read it and so do you ton of different studies and I look at different stuff for different things that we're talking about. And
yes,
the good thing what a study does is it might highlight some issue or give some insight or go, look at this. Its conclusions may not always be sound yet. If it's lasted over time, great, and it still stands the test of time. I had that argument too with one of my professors one time where I was talking about Yerkes Dodson and what they found out,
right,
and they're like, "Well, don't you want to use something newer?" I was like, this still holds true today, 100 fucking years later. So why don't
precisely.
we start there? Did they get everything right? Well, no, but they found this part out. So let's use this part that still holds true today. Because what will happen is how we interpret this sometimes comes out how we want to see it. But even not even if it's our own biases, it's just literally how we look at some data. And there was one that reminded me when you brought up the baby example was I think it was the Freakonomics guys. They did this study or they looked at all these different polls and different studies that people done and questionnaires that they had people fill out and they talked to
Yeah,
like new parents who had a new baby and they would find out how much what did you do to prepare for the baby? Did you read books? Did you do this? Right? And they look into it and then they look at how that baby develops over time and where it goes to and the success of it, all these different factors. And what they were trying to show is like, okay, do reading baby books make you a better parent? Does that prepare you? And their argument was, well, you don't know. Is it the information they're getting from the baby books, or is it because they're the type of person that would want to research the best way to do it and make a
precisely.
plan and go for it? So is it even the information that they're reading that's
Or
helping,
the
or is it or
process.
is it the process, or they're the
You're
type of
exactly right.
they're already that type of person? You know what so that's
So
one way to just look at it.
Justin Kruger and David Dunning didn't
You're
mean to come off as assholes.
You
Okay,
your two favorite people?
our favorite people from Cornell, right? What they did is they tried to do a very good thing, and they brought up great
Right.
things that are on the periphery of
Yeah.
confirmation bias that didn't need to be additional.
Right.
Number one is that we overinflate our own skills. We think that we're capable of so much more than we are, and we think that our decision in a matter matters as much as the subject matter expert's opinion. And none of those things are true. They're borne out by science. So how can I prove that? A restaurant chain tried to compete with McDonald's, who had the quarter pounder, Brian.
Yeah.
And so they came to the market with a 1/3 pound cheeseburger. Anybody remember A&W? Anybody remember when that happened? And Americans looked at the numbers and thought 1/3 was less than 1/4.
Yeah.
And the whole thing failed.
Well,
And
3
no
is a smaller number
offer
than
it.
4, Greg.
So that, Brian, is a science denier. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? That didn't ask the local doper who can do dope math, which is also known as the metric system.
Yeah.
And so what happens is confirmation bias 101, which is Dunning-Kruger effect and so many others, is that you are inclined to believe your own shit, even in the face of adversarial information or contrary information. And not only that, but the most important part is you tend to seek out information that confirms your belief, and you get a dump of dopamine every time you find it. So if the article on television goes, mysterious state, what do? You point at the TV and go, see, that proves it. No, it's loosely related at best, and it hasn't been researched or socialized.
Yeah, and
that's the problem with Dunning-Kruger.
Well, the funniest, the most ironic,
trap.
the funniest part about the whole fucking Dunning-Kruger thing is the people who are using it. They go, "Oh, that guy's clearly got Dunning-Kruger," and you're like, "No, you fucking do." Like, like it's so funny. It's the irony is just every time I see a meme about that or sometimes it's like, just stop.
You're
stop.
back
like,
to the point of correcting me that it wasn't Gandhi.
It
doesn't matter that it wasn't Gandhi.
It's confirmation bias, but either way, it's important to understand that too. Is like it's not nefarious when people do that, or they're not stupid, or they're not assholes. Right? When you teach me something, Greg, and I really enjoy it, or I think it's cool, and I want to go out and tell everyone, no, it's like this is how you do this. I always think of like working with any younger military, like young Marines or young soldiers, whatever, and they're so confident in their abilities and they're so confident they can do this, and you're like, oh my God, you don't even know what you don't know. But that's a good thing in that point, because you want them to be confident what they are, and you want them to have that. Like, it's like the whole, I got taught when I was first in the Marine Corps, you're not supposed to rest your magazine on the ground when you're firing, because it'll induce some sort of stoppage. And you're like, no, it fucking doesn't.
Right.
40 years ago with those old shitty Vietnam mags, it was completely different. It could, but not today. Like, that's junk. Right. That's complete. But it's stuck around, and someone wanted to, thinking, I don't want this Marine to have some sort of stoppage in the middle of combat. I better instill this lesson in them. Like, even though the lesson is junk and bullshit.
Right. It's not going to be a stable platform to sight in your target. So don't do it.
Yeah.
But listen, we were working with the Marines, and a young E6 comes up to me right in the middle of my presentation, because I was trying to explain to him how you could use a Kim's game to increase situational awareness back in the combat 100 day. And so I'm talking about Rudyard Kipling's Kim.
Yeah.
And the E6 stops me, and he goes, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Kim, the Marines designed Kim. And I go, "They did?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's keep in memory." And I go, "What's the S for?" Kim's game. And it was because Rudyard Kipling's Kim.
Yeah.
Okay. And he goes, "No, that's keep in memory, stupid."
Yeah.
And we laughed and laughed. And Brian, he was willing to go to bat and fight me over it, that it was Marine invented it and wrote it.
And I was taught it stood for keep in memory sniper.
Oh my God. And so here's a perfect example of cognitive immunization, cognitive sterilization. We have to put to death those things that disagree with our point. So look, I'm big boned. That's why I'm fat. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Now listen, I have something intolerance, insert whatever.
Yeah.
It's genetics. And
it's genetics, Greg. I don't have a chance.
I think of Uncle Buck, where he's talking and he says, "I've been eating a lot of cheese. Do you think that's it?" Do you remember Uncle Buck? Maybe it's the hat. He always had something, Brian, that was in the back of his
That was his
mind
hat.
that was
Some
more
people, I really
accurate.
piss people off sometimes. Sometimes it's the hat. It's just the hat.
So
They don't like the
you
hat. And
don't let the facts get in the way of a perfectly good story. And what's happening is that your conviction is so overpowering and compelling that other people around you start believing your stuff, and longevity takes place.
yeah,
Grandma wouldn't tell me about this if it
that
wasn't true,
and
right?
that's the firing from the mag example I just gave. That
Yes,
that
yes,
may have been true 40, 50 years ago, but it's not
yep,
today. And it
not
wasn't when
even
I learned
close.
it. And so those things, and again, that's because someone was trying to do the right thing. They were trying to set me up for success, not what doesn't have to be something negative. But, we often, we we like to stick with what we know, and I know we don't have to
Chemically,
get into, yes,
yep,
and we don't have to get into a lot of detail there, but like one of the domains that's what we teach is heuristics and understanding how you process information, how even your working memory affects your vision. I mean, more so than
absolutely,
the or as much as the light that's in the room, because you start filling things in. Your brain wants to expect, it wants to determine the outcome before it happens, so it'll fill
yeah,
in information, and we go on our own biased subjective experience in life, because every single human being is walking around with their own view of the world and how things are, and you do
precisely.
not see it like another person. You always give the great example of watching the Jason Bourne movies, and everyone sees them as what? The protagonist, Jason Bourne, who's kicking
Yep,
ass. No one goes, hey, see that guy picking up the dishes in the restaurant in the back? That's
exactly.
me. That's me.
It's
I want to be that
nobody
guy.
in a movie on a date has ever had that conversation, Brian.
Side note, I
I
always thought it'd be
yep,
funny to be like a person who's in family photos in different movies. You know how
right.
like they're like being a scene, there's family photos. I thought it'd be hilarious if like you were the person in the family photos. I just
Yep.
side note on
Oh,
that.
that's hilarious.
But
So,
like
Brian, when I took over as the chief of police in that mountain town, and I had my desk put in the bullpen rather than had the office, and I used the office for the interview room. And everybody goes, "What are you doing?" Chief has their own office, and it's like, "Nah, I'm with you. I'm just another copper, right?" And so on my desk, I only use two types of photos: photos of other people's wives and
oh my
children,
God.
or the photos that came with the photo case that I bought at Walmart. And people would walk by and go, "Who's that? Your kids?" And I go, "No, that's Jay Cease's wife and kids." And
That's
they go,
so
"Well,
cute.
who's that?" And I go, "I don't know. I bought that frame at Walmart."
It's a nice
Why?
frame.
Just to be unsettling.
Yeah.
Look, Stanford History Education Group did a great study in 2016, and what they demonstrated during a very large and broad study that was socialized, well, and vetted, that middle school, high school, and college kids were terrible at evaluating the quality of online information,
Hmm.
and that's what they were using to support all of their arguments. So if you have an unstable foundation, go back to the
Right.
Bible, go back to the Code of Sumer. You get what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Then your house is going to collapse. It cannot stand. Hey, there was an American politician that used that. The other example, very recently, they did two different groups, and it went down the red and blue political lines, and they had a study of a gun control ban. They gave
Right.
both parties the exact
That's
same
it. Yeah.
study, but guess what? Their political views adversely affected how they interpreted the results. So even if the results showed one thing, the tendency was for them to say, yeah, but what that really means is, and interpret the data to support their
That
conclusion.
and
So
yes.
just knowing that helps you in negotiations. Just knowing that helps you talk to your wife or your kids or your significant other. Just knowing that will make you shut the hell up when you're having one of those arguments about religion or politics.
Well,
But do
it
we? But do we? And
no,
the answer
because
is no.
it takes a little bit. And you know what? There's the great example, that movie I was telling you about, that Moneyball, where about the Oakland A's and Billy Bean and all that, and
Exactly.
then got adopted by everyone's doing that. It's a great movie if you want to see it, anyone. But it's we're talking about baseball, and they took a 100% data approach, which anyone knows anything about baseball,
Yep.
it's math. Like baseball is math. It's all about percentages and averages and numbers, and the laws of large numbers and what you do. That's why people will go and tell you like there's no such thing as a slump when these guys get, oh, they're in a hitting slump. Like, no, they're not. Like, this is over
It's
time.
right back to flipping the coin.
Over
Exactly.
time, they've been so hot. They've been hitting 800 all season. They have
Right.
to hit 100 for a while in order for it to average out. It just over time, that's what's going to occur. You can't take a small snapshot. But the whole thing was, there's a great scene because in that movie Moneyball, because you got these old school, guys who've been scouting talent their whole life, and they're building baseball teams off that. They get big good money to go to all over the country and find these players, right? And they're going, but this guy doesn't look like a ball player. No, look at him, he does, and that's what a pro like. They're using all of these
Yep.
horrible methods to gauge it because it's cognitively close enough to someone they did find that worked out really well, that did go on to an amazing career and was a good
Yes.
find. But they're looking for that mold, where you had the other side. This is just some kid going, well, here's the numbers of what we need. I need a batter that hits over 275 and can play the outfield. I need that. And they just took the whole math side of it and looked at what are the numbers and like,
Yep.
wait, you got all these ragtag different people. This isn't a big hitter here. It's like, I don't need one of those. I need one of these. Well, this guy is like a relief pitcher, but he's not the best. It's like, I don't need him to do the best. I just need him to hit this many saves over the course of the season. And I know mathematically that means that's going to put me over the edge of my closest competitor. So when they stuck with pure numbers, they went, holy crap. Well, that changed the way you looked at players. That changed the way everything, because we had this faulty way, this I call the good old boy way of doing it. Oh yeah,
Yep.
he's one of the good old boys. You know what I mean? It's like, no, you have to show me the numbers, show me the data. But that's
The,
how we are as humans. That's
the
just how
hair
we're
on
wired.
the hair on the back of my neck stood up when you gave that example, because you started explaining that to me yesterday. We had a different conversation, and it's so apropos that you brought it to this conversation. But I'll tell you this: cops show up because we dial 911.
Yeah.
Cops show up to the most ambiguous environments and have to draw information quickly,
Yep.
and sometimes get gunned down before they even put their scout car in
It's
park.
literally the definition of the term VUCA that they use:
It,
volatile,
it,
uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous.
always, okay?
Yeah.
Now, we know that there's a gap somewhere, because we know that a determined enemy can kill a cop. And what do? We mistakenly attribute the why instead of looking at the how. And what I mean by what you just said,
Yeah.
okay, is I see all the time these people, and I hear them say it, and I see them put it online, that a determined opponent, this and that and the other, and they say, okay, well, you got this MMA fighter, and he's really well trained, but a street fighter would just turn his ass inside out. No, you're drunken, shitty, undisciplined, eating crap food, unhealthy asshole has to ambush to gain the
Right.
advantage on that person.
Right.
So if they rabbit punch you, or when you walk away, stab you in the back or hit you with the bottle, because there's rules in the other realm. So the cops are still playing by the rules. Society demands that. The
Yeah.
Supreme Court rules on constitutionality. Right. Lower courts rule on your behavior compared to a standard. And that standard is deliberate, Brian. It's not ambiguous, yeah? And then all of a sudden you get a copper that's going into a situation thinking it's us versus them, it's good versus evil. I can outthink or outrun or outshoot the person, and it doesn't matter, because guess what? The other person isn't playing by the same set of rules.
No,
they're not playing by that dynamic. And that's exactly what we're talking about. So we have to, if we're going to address how cops are getting killed, we have to address that. We have to address the belief system, because if your belief system is faulty as the cop going into the situation, and your belief system is faulty as that kid on the street with the gat in the pocket, listen, Brian, it's inevitable that those two things are going to come together and cause a harmful or fatal event. Yes, you get my point. Just based on your statistics and analysis of the baseball game.
Yes. So, that's
wow.
We don't. Well, in your example, we're still not. That police officer isn't using the data example. They're using this is what I was.
Neither is the academy.
They're using the. I've been scouting baseball players my whole life, and I picked out some winners example, because that works most of the time. But it's in a different.
I've been in
realm.
7-foot chases.
Right. This works every time.
I've been in 35 police pursuits.
But that goes back to flipping the coin. That goes back to flipping the coin. Each one is a new set of probability. So when I flip the coin one time, I got a 50, and I bet heads, I got a 50-50 chance, right?
Yep.
I do it again, I still got a 50-50 chance. I do it again,
even if it matter how long my streak is.
Yeah,
that's the point.
Each one is its own set of probability. I agree that one, the public doesn't understand that at all in these cases.
Yes.
The police
The third
understand it a
versus the quarter
little
pounder.
bit, right? Meaning, yeah, that's online debates right there. That's the third versus quarter pounder. That's what you see all
You
the
got it.
time. But we don't look at that as each set of its own set of circumstances, the own determination, probability-wise, of what it could, what the outcome could be, and how you affect that. So that's kind of what we're saying with how to compute that. Because how do I defeat the fact, right? How do I not fall into that same trap? How do I not become the old scout that goes, hey, I found this guy. He's a ball player. Look at him. He's tall. He's got the right build. He's real athletic looking. It's like, what the fuck is
He's got the
athletic looking?
look.
Well,
Remember?
athletic
He's got
looking.
the look.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
got the look.
exactly. I
So
think you're coming on to me.
and we do that because it's
Sometimes it's
comfortable,
the hat.
and
Right.
we
do that,
fall into that trap. And
but
so
explain, Brian, explain why it's comfortable. It's comfortable because it releases endorphins. It releases chemicals and electrochemical signals that make your brain feel safe in that environment.
Because
feel more secure and less anxious.
Well, especially if it's a volatile, uncertain, chaotic, ambiguous environment. I need an anchor. I need something to cling to go, all right, this is a little crazy. I haven't seen this before, or you know what, I've seen something close enough. It looks just like this. You know what? That's what I'm going to do. And well, many of the times that's probably the correct thing to do. But you can't always weigh it against your past experiences. You have to determine what from that past experience works in this situation, what doesn't work in this situation, and how can I approach this not as a template match, because this goes into, hey, when this occurs, you have three choices. You can do A, B, or C. No, prototypically, how do I reach around in my brain with everything that I've accrued throughout my life and apply the right algorithm right here?
You're back
That's
to heuristics.
What we're trying to do.
Specifically and accurately, a perfect street definition. I would go one step further, Brian. I would say that you have to be able to pay it forward. So in other words, the lessons that you learn have to be utile in a variety of situations. Yes, they address this situation, but what did I learn from this situation that I can use in future situations? Like, for example, that not all pursuits end in a wreck and a fatality, but some do. Not all shootouts, I'm going to shoot the hand that's holding the knife rather than center mass, even if I train. And what I'm trying to say is, Brian, what you don't want to do is you don't want to muddy the water with extraneous information, but what you want to do is you want to take a look at the situation and the choices you made and be very critical on what worked and what didn't, so I can use it again. Right. Because if not, every skin knee is going to be a new learning experience, right? And we can't do that.
So this gets into how do I counteract all these things, right? And that's through that yes. Obviously the training process. But to kind of highlight that, I want to start with, there's again one of the there's some great examples out there. They've done this study in a number of different ways, but one of the ways you'll have like a psychologist will set up a study and it'll take a bunch of people and find out what their attitude is on a specific topic, right? So let's say that's gun control. Let's say that's abortion. Let's say that's some emotionally charged hot button topic. And they'll say, create a survey, however long, 1 to 5 scale, 1 to 7 scale, rate how you feel about this, rate how you feel. And so get a baseline for that individual. All right, here's where we are. So you're very, you're anti-gun and you want as much gun control measures. You know what, Greg? You want to repeal the Second Amendment. Yep. What they'll do is I'll take you, Greg, and go, okay, I've got your baseline data. Got it. Here's what you need to do. You're going to write me a 500 or 1,000-word essay on why we don't need gun control, why the Second Amendment is the most important amendment and you have that right. I want you to go do that. Well, what does that have to do? It forces you to take on a different perspective that's contrary to your beliefs. So this is the point of this, was they give you that assignment. Then once you turn in your assignment, Greg, I'm going to retest you. I'm going to see where your beliefs are from that baseline test. And guess what they always find? That measurement changes a little bit. Now, for some more than others, but it changes how strong your conviction is in your beliefs because you were forced to take on the opposite side and the opposite role. And now that's just an example of how this stuff works, because if you've never seen that, you've never taken the other side, it's very difficult to do. But that's what training sort of should be. It's okay. I'm
So,
going to, I mean, don't we do that to some people? Like we piss some people off sometimes in a
but
class.
it's okay. And Brian,
But
listen,
it's
for over
literally on
50
purpose, not
years,
to F with them. It's for to
no,
prove a point.
for over 50 years, we've been talking about taking someone else's perspective and opinion,
It's
and still lost concept on some
so
people. I'll give you a
difficult.
quick example. So, 15-year-old kid's got an illegal gun, driving a stolen car. So we got a property crime, we got a weapons offense, and we got a kid that hasn't established right and wrong, good and evil very well yet because his brain is still growing. Now all of a sudden the red and blues come on, freeze, don't move. Do I dump the gun? Do I run with the gun? Do I run and dump the gun? Do I pull the gun to try to scare the people off? Do I hit the gas pedal? All these decisions are going through this untrained brain. Yeah? Okay. Now, would I have to hear from a trained cop that gives me shit because of my opinion? Yeah, well, the kid shouldn't have been in a fucking stolen car. He shouldn't have had the gun in the first place. I understand your
Yeah.
rudimentary point.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is that the kid was in the car,
Yeah, so
and it's at night,
so it
and it's
negates that,
in
like
progress.
that. Well,
So
those things that people argue are assumed. Yes, you're not
yes,
supposed to do that. Yes, that's illegal.
but
Great.
we
So,
can't go
like,
back. You know,
yeah,
the person drowned. Yeah, well, they should have learned how to swim. Yeah, you get it.
no
But
shit.
your knee jerk, ridiculous belief perseverance ass is fighting against logic. And Dunning Kruger, don't sue me. I want you to listen to something. We have science
Dunning and
deniers.
Kruger. I want you to listen.
Both. We have science deniers, which comes from the camp of science denial, which means that science is sketchy. Not everybody understands it, and you're mystifying me because I don't fully understand the thing, and I didn't really read it anyway. Okay,
Yeah.
I just scanned the headline. Then we've got the illusion of explanatory depth people, and you know what they say? They say, listen, the more bullshit I throw out there, and the deeper that conviction is, that sooner or later you'll read it. I can't name the guy because I don't see it, but the water of life was on television. And if I send you this drop of water and you rub it on your hands, the next check in your account's going to be 50,000. They made that Steve Martin made that movie about that. And right now some religious fundamentalist is going to say, fuck you, I'm going to kill you. No, listen to what's happening. Those are both sides of the confirmation bias coin. We don't need a new description of it. What we need is humans to understand that it happens. Because if we understand that right now I'm getting bent out of shape over this thing or this thing or this thing, and we just take a step back and give ourselves a gift of time and distance, it's really not that important. It's really something that we can get past. It's really something that I can go, you know what? This kid doesn't want to go to jail tonight. He's a little drunk. He's a little high. Mom doesn't know he's out with the neighbor's car. Do you get what I'm trying to say? But we don't do that. Why? Because confirmation bias is a strange bitch that's so tight that wants us to believe our own crap, and it's reinforced every single day that we're awake and we live. We live today. Why, Brian?
Yeah.
Not because the environment was easier today, but because we're the smartest predator on the planet. Holy shit. If I hear one more person tell them that they're a warrior and an apex predator and all that other stuff, stop it. You're overvaluating. And that's not Dunning-Kruger. What that is confirmation bias.
Well, that's
your own biases are confirming
that's also
information that is unsupportable.
A high level of societal douchebaggery, I believe is the scientific term.
Guess what we do? You're exactly right, but guess what we do? We praise those folks.
Right.
And online now you get a following, so that makes you think that you're right.
Right.
You get what I'm trying to say?
And that's the issue you do see even with people, Greg, who are subject matter experts or very well respected in one area. Yeah. When I see them go wrong or when I see they get criticism is because they try to take that into some other domain where they're not. Yeah. A perfect example, that guy, he's the Harvard guy, Steven Pinker. He did the whole studies of memetics and he's written a ton of incredible stuff. He's the one going like, hey, look, if you by all measurement, human life has gotten better, not worse. Like we're better. Yes. Like, but he's a brilliant guy and he's I think a neuroscientist as well. He does a few things, but you know, very well respected, taught at Harvard, all this stuff, has the bona fides. And then he goes, really, you know, some ridiculous, stupid opinion about what should happen in Ukraine. And, you know, why don't we just move the nukes out of Europe because it's, and that way Putin will see it as a win. He's trying to go, Putin will see that as a win, but we can still defeat them and they'll end this war, blah, blah, blah. And everyone was like, okay, so you don't know foreign policy 101. You don't
Right,
understand how nuclear deterrence works. You don't, it was just like such
right.
an ignorant way of looking at it from a very brilliant person because what? They step sort of outside and go, well, hey, I'm really good here. I'm getting really popular and everyone likes my opinions. Well, why don't I give one on this one? It's like, well, hang on, man. Like that
But
was
we have to be cognizant that that's our default
yes.
in our primitive brain. And once we accept that, training will change and get better. People will be less anxious and angry over everything, and they'll get better. People will stop scanning headlines or believe. Look, the entire idea of naming something fake news gives us an
Yeah.
out. It
Yeah.
gives
Yeah.
us
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
excuse to support what? Confirmation bias.
Well,
So fake news is just like calling it
it's
Dunning-Kruger. Fake
it's
news is confirmation bias. It's written by a person to manipulate your opinion to
yeah.
gain an advantage in a situation.
It's that misinformation and disinformation has been
They're all
around
the same
for
word.
a long, long,
Precisely.
long time. And this,
Propaganda and come
well,
on.
even if you go back to, that's why I always recommend that book, the Writing on the Wall of Social Media, the first
Great book.
2,000 years, because the guy goes back, he goes, look, you understand, like in ancient Rome, they would come out and they would put the news on the wall or whatever the Senate hearing was, whatever they came out with, and they'd post it for everyone to read. Well, not everyone could read back then, so someone had to read it to you, and
Yep.
sometimes that would get changed. But guess what else was popular back then? Hey, I want to hear what Greg has to say about this. So we write letters, and hey, my buddy Greg, was his interpretation of it, and that was popular. Well, that's a pundit. Like that's all the same
You've
shit that
got it.
happens today, and we put
And
our own
why do we
opinions
say
on it.
don't kill the
So,
messenger?
right,
And why do we play the
exactly.
telephone game, Brian?
Yeah,
Because
it's
it proves all of the same conclusive evidence that's been around. And like my dear friend Brian Marin says, hey, good things stick around. Good ideas have longevity. And here, what we're trying to say is that if the information, look, you don't have to change your belief system, but if there's contrary information, at least if the information that's contrary to you is based in fact and logic and science, at least open your mind that it exists.
it
Because it's not to the contrary. You cannot tell me that
and
UFOs exist because we haven't proven they
right.
haven't.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's not what
that's
I'm
not how
saying.
it works.
What I'm trying to say is that you need to step back, give your brain the gift of
So
time and distance,
so
be
that and then
skeptical and
and
study.
that's my other thing is like, well, so what? What the hell am I supposed to do about this? Because we just talked about all those different things we talked about are tied to survival. So you're like, well,
Right.
I'm fucking wired this way. What am I supposed to do? And so it's kind of like what you were just mentioning. I mentioned about the whole study of writing an essay that counters your opinion. You
You're
don't
right.
have to do all
Read
that
more,
stuff,
study more,
but the
consider more.
well the idea is rather than trying to weigh out all the evidence on every single issue that people are talking about, just understanding your own belief system and where it comes from, doing well, wait, why do I feel this way about this topic?
Yes.
Why is it that this makes me upset? Why does reading this make me upset? And you can just be introspective to, man, I've got these little triggers that I didn't even realize were happening. It has nothing to do with this story or what's going on here.
Yep.
This is internal. And when you can sort of focus on those and because it's like everyone wants change, but no one wants to change, right? So it's who wants change, and everyone raises their hand and goes, who specifically wants to change themselves? Well, fucking no one wants to do that.
You got
So
it.
if you can kind of start that process of looking at why you think of your own beliefs that way, that's the way to do it. I love it when we're in class too, and we get, one of those questions, a really good question from a student or someone that sort of counters what we're saying, because why? It goes, fuck, I have to do a better job of explaining my
Yep.
opinion on that, or I have to do a better job of explaining my process on that and why I think it's better than what you brought up, and it gives me insight to what it only makes us better, right? To go, well,
Yep.
what about this? So I was, again, looking at how do you change a cognitive process that you have no control over? Well, step one, you can't.
Yeah.
Step two is you can affect it though,
It's
right? You can,
ambitious.
I
It's
mean,
ambitious. You can.
you
You
can,
can push it around. You
yeah,
can't stop a tornado, Brian. You get what
no,
I'm
but
trying
you
to
can
say?
get out of
You
its
can't stop
path.
the
You can
tempest. Yes.
predict it better. You can
And tell
understand the
other people
effects.
that the
Yeah,
tornado is coming and
yeah,
not just let them get crashed into it. I'll tell you this, and it's a close spiral. I don't understand B-logs, and I don't understand how people are on social media all day long just sniping at each other. Don't they have fucking jobs? I mean, I don't get it
Yeah.
sometimes, Brian, but I read one, and the person was talking about intellectual acumen. They were talking about arguing with the person and saying, just because you're smarter than me doesn't mean your opinions are more important. Well,
Well, in
from
a specific
opinion-based
context, yeah.
testimony, from opinion-based testimony, it actually does. You know, so you need to take a step back from that for a minute. And then the next person that wrote in was, yeah, I heard there was a lot of smart people in the Nazi Party. There you go.
Okay.
Well, great, well-researched argument. Now, Brian,
Such
I
backwards
shut off the
logic.
computer.
Like there's
I
no.
shut off the computer and went out in the yard because I was like, if this is what passes for intellectual optimism or skepticism today, I don't want to be a part of it. But you get where I'm going. I mean, that's what makes people my age and older afraid, Brian.
Right,
You guys
right.
understand that it's just that way that
No,
communication
and
but it scares me when
I
I
told
read
you
it.
normally I don't get into this generation and generation stuff because most of those conversations are fucking horse shit. And guess what?
Right?
Every generation has said about the new generation. All
Oh
these
yeah, of
damn
course.
kids these days, they're
Yep. That damn
Plato
jazz
wrote about
music.
it. Plato wrote about how he was
He
becoming
sure did.
embarrassed to be Greek because the next Okay, so if that were the case, where each successive generation is worse than the last one, we'd be fucking dead. We wouldn't be
We'd be
here
a bunch
anymore.
of idiots,
So
right?
obviously that's not the case. But when you're talking about things like this and how people deal with it, absolutely, because you see something in print and from your life and how things work in typical discussions, when you see a comment, one, when you read, you know this, when you read something out loud and write it down, it's much different than what's happened in the conversation, right? When something,
Precisely.
it's different what you say over the radio, and then when it gets read out aloud in court, you're like, oh, that doesn't sound very good, right? But so that it's taken out of context, sort of, but it's also a different way of looking at things where you would look at it and go, how the fuck can this guy say it? Where I'll look at it as like, this guy's a clown. Like you don't
Right,
pay
right.
attention
But
to it.
again, my
Yeah,
context has always been in court
right.
testimony,
But
in
and
scientific arenas.
and not just life experience, Greg. That's a generational difference too.
Yes,
I
no, I
agree.
agree. I agree.
Yeah,
And what I'm saying is from everything that has tainted and touched me, I
which is a
respond in
lot.
kind. Yeah, Uncle. But when we talk about being subjective and rationalizing things, do you know what? That's confirmation bias.
Yeah,
So I don't need somebody else to name Greg and Brian's Aristotle dilemma because that's exactly what it is. So what I'm saying is that the words that come out of your mouth now, you may have to walk them back in an hour from now if you didn't consider things. So I'm not saying homeostasis means we're neutral, we don't move forward.
right.
What I'm saying is that we'll move forward better, more efficiently and efficaciously
Yeah,
if we're informed. And training is a form of taking information and
it,
making it
making it relevant, making
operationalized.
it, yeah,
Make it,
operationalize
yeah,
it, make it relevant, make it
I
useful,
agree.
right?
I absolutely agree.
Take that wonderful. I mean, this is why I talk about that and use some of those examples from some of those great books we've read. It's like, okay, this is what that means today. What this author was saying about how communication happened during in ancient Rome. That's
Right.
no look at what we do today. It's not unlike that. So what did they do back then to deal with it? Did they deal with it? Well, what have we learned from that? It's just more examples of it. So I think that's a good point, and I think I'm going to put on to the listeners as an assignment. I think two things we need all right, we need to know, define the Brian and Greg effect and the
There you go.
Greg and Brian effect, because I
Yeah.
feel like
No,
there's
I
two
like
different
that.
ones.
I like that. There are.
So we'll put it on them
And
because
we
we already
need to
have
see that.
listeners. Shout out to the Distinguished Savage, to Walt down in Texas. If you guys want to check out the Distinguished Savage podcast, it's awesome. But our buddy Walt started the Royal Order of Homophily, which are Greg fans, and so
And
if
there's
you're,
three of them. You know.
it's three more fans than I have, so
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Well, hey,
that's
on a
including my
side note,
family too. So
on your Patreon, on our weekly, Brian,
yeah,
I sent you that video this morning that our consigliere Sean
yes,
sent, and
I
it's
did. It's
right in
brutal.
line
Yeah,
with
yeah, yeah.
our
Like you
with
said in the email, you
Joe's
can
comments from
see it
earlier.
coming. Yeah.
So let's do this. Let's break that down for the
Okay.
folks on the Patreon
I
because
agree.
I'll tell you what, it's frightening.
Yeah.
And Joe Reed, if you're listening to the podcast, it's exactly what we were talking about on our emails the last couple of days. So, Brian, and it fits hand in glove with what we just talked about. Confirmation bias. We walk into a scene, somebody says the person has a gun, and we don't see the gun. We don't anticipate the danger. Why? Because over time, 3 times in the same night, we get the same call to the same place. There's problems, folks, and training is going to set you free. Open your brain, open your eyes, but open your brain too. Situation awareness is not enough. It's the critical thinking that goes with being a good and valid human that's more important. I
Yeah,
really believe that.
perspective is everything, right?
I
Or
think
is
so.
this
Context,
is
relevance.
it perspective, or is it bias, or is it, I mean,
Is it
that's,
reality or your preferred reality? I mean,
yeah,
simply break it down, right?
yeah,
Because that's the problem. And you know what? Sometimes your preferred reality is wrong, but it's your comfort zone, and you got to step out of it.
yeah. I think that's a good spot to sort of bring it in for a landing. So thanks, everyone, always for tuning in, and remember to reach out, leftofgreg@gmail.com. Of course, we got the Patreon site as well. We have, it's only a few bucks, and we put all kinds of extra content on there. And like Greg was talking about, some videos or some breakdowns and some lessons, stuff like that we discuss on here. We can go into some more detail and use some actual videos or photos, because it's all video based on there for those lessons. So you can check that out too. Any final comments, Greg?
Thanks everybody for celebrating my birthday with me. Your kind words overwhelm me. Thank you.
All right. Well, don't forget, everyone, that training changes behavior.